So hello, welcome to the video and welcome to Bogota in Colombia. Colombia has quite a famous Caribbean coast. Cartagena is probably the most famous city on that part of the country. It's really beautiful. It was the first place in Colombia that I ever visited and it was really quite a nice place to go. But what a lot of people don't know is that Colombia also has a couple of Caribbean islands. Providencia, I believe it's called, and where I'm flying to today, which is San Andreas. Now, as with all islands in the Caribbean, there's a bit of history to the place, and the end of that history, bringing us to today, has resulted in it being owned by Colombia, even though it's actually far closer to the coastline of Nicaragua. But it has palm trees, it has beaches, it has quite a touristy feel to the place, and if you believe the weather forecasts over the next 2 days when I'm there, it's also going to have a tremendous amount of rain, but it should still be fun nevertheless. So I had two choices of airlines to fly up there. The first was LATAM, but I've chosen to fly on Colombia's flag carrier Avianca. It's always nice to fly a flag carrier, but as Avianca is also part of the Star Alliance, my gold status through Aegean Airlines should also make the experience a little bit more comfortable. It's an all-economy flight, although there is a little section up the front which is sort of economy plus, which is what I've paid a premium to sit in today. Blocked middle seats, so I think a European airline would call it business, but South American airlines aren't quite that cheeky. About a 2-hour flight, and I'm quite looking forward to it. So if you'd like to see what Avianca's domestic service is like, stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe to the channel so you can come with me on my next trip. So into Bogota's quite modern terminal building. I said San Andreas in that intro. I must have had earthquakes on the mind, as I did of course mean San Andres. And although I hadn't planned to make a video about my flight back to Bogota, it was actually quite interesting, so I'll add a brief section at the end of this video about that return experience. I did struggle a bit to find where to go here. Avianca's international and domestic departures seemed to be all mashed together, so it wasn't at all clear to me where I needed to be. I had checked in online, but I always like having a paper boarding pass, as paper doesn't run out of battery. I had no bags to check, so tried an automated machine, but the helpful attendant told me that it wasn't working and that there was actually a Star Alliance gold desk around the corner. So off I trotted and joined a fairly lengthy and slow-moving queue. I'd read that even though it was a domestic flight, San Andres Island was actually a national park and that there was some additional red tape around flights there. So I persevered and eventually it was my turn. It turned out that those extra requirements were handled at the gate, and I think the agent must have taken pity on my pathetic Spanish, so she felt the need to escort me out of the queue and point me unambiguously in the right direction. Hey ho.
Shortcut. Gracias. Thank you.
Domestic security was pretty quick, and I was decanted into a large duty-free shop in this domestic terminal. I can't explain this. I can only assume you're able somehow to get through to the international part of the terminal, even if you start out in the domestic bit. Or perhaps my European preconceptions of how duty-free works is invalid in Colombia. Let me know in the comments if you can answer this. As a Star Alliance Gold Card holder through Aegean, I was able to access the lounge, which was clearly signed, and I got a friendly welcome. And the lounge was really nice. I had low expectations for a domestic facility, but it was large, comfortable, and quite well equipped. Some views, but only of the car parks. And at about 11:40 AM it was pretty quiet too. I didn't get a good shot of the manned bar for some reason, but beers were only available from midday and mixed drinks only from 2 PM. There was a buffet, salad stuff at this sort of intermediate time of day. It was really very nice for an hour or so before it was time to head to the gate. I left plenty of time as I knew there'd be an additional chore when I got there. And indeed there was. A stall had been set up to take payment of $30 for the national park entry fee that all non-Colombians have to pay in order to visit. Perhaps a little cheeky, but at least I'd read about it beforehand, so it wasn't a nasty surprise. Avianca hadn't made me aware of it.
Black or blue. Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
There was a small delay as the plane was a little late arriving, but it pulled on to stand about 20 minutes late, a 14-year-old Airbus A320 that's been in the Avianca fleet since delivery. Avianca and its regional subsidiaries operate over 70 of these planes, so it's not a small airline. Some combination of my gold status and being in the upfront cabin allowed me to board as part of Group 1. A few minutes of #boarding not boarding, but at least it was in the air-conditioned bit of the terminal, although it was quite clement in Bogota, so it wouldn't have been a problem to be buffered in the outside air. And once that door was opened, we were #boarding not boarding in the outside air as well. We were held for about 10 minutes while the cleaning was completed, but we were at least entertained by how thoroughly the cleaning crew was frisked when they left the plane. Not sure what they're worried about the cleaning squad nicking from a plane, given all the good stuff is locked up when the plane is on the ground, but it helped pass the time. Then on board, and I was in the last of 3 rows of this up-front seating. I think it shows up in the video, but it wasn't a regular seat with the middle one blocked such as you find on European airlines these days. Instead, it was actually a 2-seat unit with a central fixed block. Quite spacious and quite comfortable for this 2-hour flight. This is what 33 inches of seat pitch looks like, which was ample. A tray table, which did tray table things, and above that a device/cup holder, which was a nice feature. A literature slot and a slightly grubby window overlooking the apron and the airport's resident poltergeist. That central unit was handy, but I got the feeling that something was missing. And there were overhead air vents, which is always a plus in warmer bits of the world. We pushed back about a half-hour late, and it was a 10 or 12 minute taxi to the end of the runway. Bogota is already nearly 9,000 feet above sea level, so at least that abbreviates the time it takes to get to cruising altitude. I'll linger on this a bit, as you don't get to see the environs of Bogota from the air that often. This was our flight path today. You can see that San Andres is much closer to Nicaragua than the Colombian mainland. Like most Caribbean islands, there's the usual history of colonial pass the parcel before it became Colombian in 1822, and it's remained Colombian ever since. I will make a video about what I found on the island when I landed. I haven't been able to fathom why San Andres Airport abbreviates to ADZ. There was no free service even up front, but the usual buy on board options were offered. Decent value, I thought, as indeed was the case with most things you might want to consume in Colombia. I was content from my grazing in the lounge, so abstained. Of course, the passenger in front chose to hit full recline at the first opportunity, but I was left with an acceptable amount of space, even with their encroachment. So I focused on the free view out of the window. We were at 36,000 feet, but the cloud coverage was extensive and often extended above us, which surprised me a little, but I guess is not unusual for these tropical zones. There was in-flight Wi-Fi. I couldn't find a pathway out to the wider internet, but in-flight entertainment was delivered through it, as well as a pretty detailed in-flight map. Not a massive choice of movies, but offering anything on this all-economy flight was really welcome, and comes as quite a surprise to those of us whose expectations have sagged so far from our experience of European airlines. And down into San Andres. Sit on the right of the plane for the views, I was on the left. Some of these adjacent properties have wonderful runway views. I paid over £1 million pesos for this flight and the return, which sounds extortionate but worked out to be 185 quid. I think that was about 120 quid for this flight with the upfront seats and about 65 quid for the return. I'd pre-purchased window seats both ways so I could film out of the window, so you can get seats for even less than this if you're prepared to play the seat allocation lottery. I thought this was exceptional value, and it wouldn't surprise me if this route was subsidised in some way to maintain good connectivity with the island. Even though there were boarding fingers, stairs were wheeled up and we were quickly off. Still part of Colombia, but a standalone territory according to the Traveller's Century Club, so territory number 139 for me. It was much warmer here than in Bogota. I hope they use the fingers when it rains, but I'm not sure they do. We arrived as a domestic flight, but there was still a security scan and a thorough check of the validity of the national park permit I'd bought at the gate in Bogota. And out to be greeted by some pleasant but persistent taxi touts. San Andres became the third airport I've been able to walk to my accommodation from, and I'll talk more about that in my video about the trip. And a couple of days later, I was back. Once again I checked in online and on this occasion decided against queuing up to get a boarding pass. It was really hot in the terminal building. There was a very pleasant looking lounge, but I was surprised and disappointed to learn that Avianca did not have an agreement for its premium passengers to be accommodated. Priority pass access only, no other lounge scheme was recognised, which I think is the first time I've come across a lounge with such restricted access rules. So I entertained myself in general circulation until it was time to board. There were a few shops and a duty-free area. I was less surprised by this, as San Andres is a duty-free area within Colombia. Back across the apron to the plane, we succeeded in dodging the rain again. Front and rear boarding was available. Up the stairs to this 5-year-old A320, and I've seen onboard systems battling humidity before, but this was quite an extreme scene to enter. Row 4 today, the seat behind the one I'd enjoyed on the way up. 28 inches of legroom here, 5 less than the row in front. Quite tight for my 6'4" frame, and with an immediate neighbour, it was all a bit of a squeeze. We took advantage of every inch of the runway to set up for takeoff, although there seemed to be plenty to spare when we rotated into the air. The right side of the plane, once again, is the best for the views, and once again, I was on the left. And an uneventful 100-minute flight back down to Bogota with the same in-flight service. I enjoyed my time with Avianca. I was pleasantly surprised with the facilities at Bogota Airport, even if San Andres Airport is quite basic. My up-front seat was fantastic, even if the regular seats behind are quite stingy on the legroom. Add in the in-flight entertainment and you've got an offering at the front of the plane that's really very good. I'd been offered an upgrade to those up-front seats for about £17 when I checked in for that return flight. I didn't take it as I wanted to share the regular seating with you, but I would happily fly Avianca again, and given the modest price differential I would happily pay the premium to upgrade to those more spacious seats. It was really quite good. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Please give the video a like if you did. Has Colombia intrigued you? Leave me a comment if it has. Please consider subscribing if you're new, and there is a Patreon account through which you can support me more directly. The link will be in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.